Next up, we've got two more options that we can use to tell TypeScript which files to touch or to compile and which files to ignore. So those two options are include and exclude, and they are related to the files option we just saw. It's a little bit confusing. But include and exclude allow us to broadly say, here's what we want you to just include this entire directory, include everything recursively located under the source directory, for example, and the test directory. And then we can go in with exclude and say, actually, exclude these two files. So we don't have to call out every, we might have 100 files. We don't need to write them all down, but we can say broadly, include everything in this folder and then exclude X or Y, whatever we want to get rid of. Now looking at the docs here, it says that the include option, it specifies an array of file names or patterns to include in the program, and any file names are resolved relative to the directory containing the tsconfig.json. You would put that in the top folder of your project, right in the root of your project. And it mentions if you specify the files option like we are right now, then the includes option will default to nothing. It won't include anything because we're saying this is the only two things we want to include. But the default, and what we've actually already seen, is that it will default to everything. So 2 stars is a glob pattern. It just means everything here, any .ts files. And we've seen that in action, right? It's defaulted to compiling all of our files. There you go, don't touch, farmstand, and index. But let's say I don't want that to happen. I'm going to delete those. And what I probably want is actually a folder where I'll put all my code inside, like maybe a source folder. And let's say that farmstand and index go in source, just like that. And now when I compile my code, TypeScript is not going to have any trouble finding these files and compiling them because the default value for includes is 2 stars, just everything. It's going to look everywhere. It's going to burrow through my folders and it's going to find these. But the thing is, it's also going to compile don't touch, and I probably don't want that if we're believing the name don't touch. So what I'm going to do is say, I only want to include the source directory. I don't want you to include anything else. So I'm going to go over to tsconfig, and this is another option that is a top level option. It does not go inside of compiler options. It goes either before or after, but on its own. And we need a comma here. And I'm going to put include, and then I'm just going to say include the source directory. So let's run it. tsc. What happens now? Only the stuff inside of the source directory that ends in .ts is compiled. Don't touch .ts is ignored. For whatever reason, I just don't want it to be touched. Probably just to illustrate how this works. So along with include, we also have the exclude option. And it does what it sounds like. We can give it an array of file names or patterns that it will then ignore. TypeScript won't compile those files. So it's only going to change files which are included as a result of the include setting. So we could say, all right, include everything in source, but then we could come in with exclude and say, actually, exclude, let's say that don't touch is in source. Sure. Exclude don't touch. .ts. Okay, so if I didn't have this on here, it would include everything in source, but now I've said, exclude don't touch .ts. Let me delete the JavaScript files though, just to prove this again. Delete you, go away. And, what am I doing? It can't be don't touch.ts. This path name is relative to the root directory where my tsconfig is. So it actually needs to be source/don't touch. Now this is kind of weird. Normally you would use exclude with a pattern. So you might say something like exclude everything that ends with .ts, or sorry, not .ts, .test. .ts or something like that. You would have some sort of pattern, or you'd say exclude everything that has this in its file name, instead of just calling out one file. But that's all I'm going to do here. I'm going to say don't compile this one file. All right, so let's try it. And there you go. So don't touch is not touched because of exclude. So these work together, right? You include whatever you want, and then exclude is going to exclude anything that you specify that would have otherwise been included. And then the first option we saw was files, which you can use on its own. And this is going to say exclusively include this file and whatever else is located or listed in this array. Now, one more thing that's important to note about exclude. It has a very important default value. If we look at the default value, it says node modules. So if we're working in a project with a node modules directory, which likely has lots of different dependencies that have been downloaded that also have TS files inside, TypeScript by default will exclude those, right? It's not going to recompile a million different TypeScript files from libraries like, that you've downloaded that are built with TypeScript. So as soon as I go and change exclude and I put my own stuff in there, now node modules should be added back in there if and only if I actually have a node modules directory, and I don't, so it's not a problem. But if we did have a node modules directory in here with a whole bunch of stuff inside of it, we would want to exclude it, so we're not compiling dependencies.